Hi, everyone. I wanted to put out some commentary on Microsoft's announcement about the sovereign cloud solution. Now, this article talks about empowering European organizations, but it's actually a little bit wider than that because it's more than just Europe that's looking for a sovereign solution. That includes the Middle East. And since I live in South Africa, it also includes several African countries, not just South Africa. So the context here for sovereign is actually much wider than just Europe. So certainly there's a demand. And with the news that we've had over the last year since the last election in America, we've had a lot of demand over the globe around we want to have the opportunity to have cloud services and to have sovereign services, to have some kind of insurance against another government that may own the hyperscaler that you may be using, to be able to reach into your data or your services. So let's have a quick look at what this article means and what it announces and what we don't have yet. So looking at this article from June 16th, we can see that we certainly have some hope in terms of what's being announced. So let's have a quick look. We have the announcement of a Microsoft Sovereign Cloud, and what we're looking at here is the ability to run hybrid or disconnected at our location. So that makes sense. We are built on Azure Local, and we know what that is. And on top of that, we are able to deploy what Microsoft calls Microsoft 365 Local. However, we need to consider what that is and what it isn't. So in Microsoft's own article, they call out Microsoft 365 Local and talks about trusted productivity service. And that includes Exchange Server and SharePoint Server. Now remember, for the rest of this video that we did talk about disconnected scenarios. So looking at what the press picked up, I'll look at Petri, and Petri called out, it provides Microsoft 365 services like Teams and Exchange Online. That's not true, and it actually cannot, since Teams is built on Exchange and SharePoint Online, with both of those known as substrate for what Teams is able to do. And also, there is no server version of Teams, neither is there a server version of Exchange Online. There is a subscription edition of Exchange Online, which effectively is Exchange Server. So then let's look at what the register talks about. It echoes the Microsoft article with Exchange Server and SharePoint Server in their own data centers or sovereign cloud environments. Sure. And then let's have a look at what Tony wrote. So Tony Redmond, fellow MVP, is the most accurate in calling out what we have and have not in the box today. So Tony accurately calls out that we would use Exchange, SharePoint, and Skype for business. That's a blast from the past. And that Microsoft 365 Local doesn't include Teams because Teams needs online services. There is no local build that is installable on premises or in a private cloud. Now, what is this strange Skype for Business thing? Well, we know that Skype for Business subscription edition was released on the same day that Exchange Server subscription edition was released, and very much like Exchange, the subscription edition, well, it's basically a license agreement change, the name was changed, and a build change, right? Same with Skype for Business. If we have a look at what's different, a license agreement, the name was changed, the build was changed. Now, very, very few of my customers still run Skype for Business in any shape or form, certainly not to collaborate widely with other businesses on the internet, because that's what we use Teams for. Now, also consider that this announcement talks about disconnected scenarios, which is rather important for a number of scenarios which would include military or very private scenarios. You can kind of join those dots. Now, what's missing here is that we have the promise of a validated architecture, right? So Microsoft would release this and then give us a validated architecture of how to install these things in a maximal supported environment. However, today, Skype for Business and Exchange Server, as well as SharePoint Server, do not support a fully disconnected environment of any sort. They regularly need to phone home and ensure that because they're a subscription edition, that they actually are allowed to run and stay activated. So what does this mean today? Today, this means there's actually nothing to buy. There's nothing called M365 local that we can buy from Microsoft today. There is an announcement. Microsoft is still working out the finer details. There is the promise of a validated configuration and architecture. However, bearing in mind the component pieces are Exchange Server Subscription Edition, as well as Skype for Business Subscription Edition and SharePoint Server Subscription Edition, we need a lot more guidance from Microsoft in terms of how do sovereign organizations in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa implement Microsoft 365 Local in a meaningful way. So with that, what we have today is an announcement. We don't have a lot of detail, and we are going to have to watch this space to see what pops out. Thanks very much for listening. And as soon as there's more meaningful data to share on this, I'll do another recording.